Welcome to the Desert Sanctuary with Carl and Laura Forehand.
Often when we have doubts about religion or simply want to ask questions, it can feel like we are wandering out into the desert.
We would like to invite you to join our sanctuary, the Desert Sanctuary.
We've tried to pick guests that would resonate with and challenge us and our fellow seekers here in the desert.
We believe that a key to the journey is to keep asking good questions, and we believe that all stories are sacred.
Our hope is that you will find life and healing for your body and mind, and that you will be able to be where you are and be who you are.
And now, here is our show. Hi, welcome back to the Desert Sanctuary podcast. I'm Laura Forehand. I'm here with Carl Forehand, and we are continuing and wrapping up our series with Larry and Jill Jordan. If you haven't listened to the past 3 episodes, please, I encourage you to go back and listen. Just like I'm drained emotionally and mentally. It's just all been really good, rich stuff that we've been talking about. So again, welcome back to the podcast, Larry and Jill. This has just been such a wonderful experience. We should do this more often.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes, it's fun.
absolutely. So make sure to look at Larry's book called The Way. Also, I said, look at Jill's art.
Yep.
But she said she doesn't like to sell it because it's like her little
Well, she
children.
holds on to it long
Yeah.
enough, maybe, but she's not making any promises.
Yeah.
So I can respect that.
But it's good if you just get to look at it.
Yes.
Quantum mechanics and
Mysticism.
and all these other things, Eastern religions, and it's all been cohesive and really makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm going to let Larry start off, and then I can take it.
Okay.
Because he's better at kind of explaining that kind of thing.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks. The book is called The Way, and people in a Christian tradition think, oh, well, that's my way. There's only one way. It's a very narrow way. That's not the understanding in the East. And people in the West think, this is a terrible name for your book. People in the East think this is a wonderful name for your book. The Tao is another way to say the way. In Buddhism, they always talk about the way. And the book is started out by a quote by a guy named Dogen Zenji. Dogen is a founder of one of the streams of Zen, and this is what he says. To study the way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be enlightened by all things. To be enlightened by all things is to remove the barrier between self and other. And that's really, to me, the heart of Zen. It's the heart of the book. Now, I intentionally did not write a Zen book because there are lots of Zen books, and there's people that are, distinctly, uniquely Zen that could write a better book about Zen. But this book is about, asking the questions and removing those barriers between self and other, which I don't think is unique to Zen.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to be prescriptive in the book to say, well, everybody should be a Zen guy, or I really wanted to say, ask the questions, and the questions lead to a lot more tolerance. And I find that in my daily life. Jill and I are blue people in a red state. Somebody says, well, how do you get along with all those Trumpy people? Same way I get along with all those Christians and Buddhists. I ask questions, and somebody will say something that is maybe on the face of it kind of outrageous to me. And I'll say, well, why do you say that? And there's a genuine, I'm looking for understanding there. I'm looking to build a bridge. I'm not looking
Right.
for an argument.
Right.
Because I've changed my mind a lot, and changing my mind is a good thing.
Yeah.
I'll say, well, what's the other side of that story? I never thought about the other side. What if you were the person in the middle of that story, not the person sitting here having coffee talking about it? Would the world look differently to you? And I've changed my mind, and other people around me have changed their minds. But the asking of the questions has been very helpful. Now, Buddhism grew out of the Hindu tradition. The historical Buddha, and this is an interesting distinction. In Buddhism, they say the historical Buddha, if there was a historical Buddha.
Mm.
And most Buddhists say it would still be terribly enlightening to study the words of the Buddha, even if the words of the Buddha were fictional. Now, you wouldn't hear that from a Christian. You would hear, well, if there was no Jesus, there's no point in any of this. And I really reject that. And part of the value I see in Christianity is the symbolism, regardless of whether it's historical or not. And I've already said I don't think that the creation account is historical. I'm not sure if the resurrection was a physical resurrection. Still, there's a lesson, still counts.
Right.
Now, in Buddhism, uh, the story goes that Buddha was a young prince. He was sheltered from old age, death, and sickness. And one day he got out of the palace and he observed old age and death and sickness. And he decided, well, I want to find a way to transcend all that. So he originally studied under all the Hindu masters and guys in caves and everything. And he sort of said, no, Hinduism's not my thing, you know. And he developed a way of thinking about things, basically that the spiritual pursuit is about minimizing suffering for yourself and for other sentient beings, and that the way to do that is to reduce um, clinging and attachment and ignorance, and that would lead you towards what they call the Eightfold Path, which is things like, it's not commandments, it's things like right belief, right intention, right work, you know, finding your place in the universe and and doing, you know, the work that's in front of you. And something that came over from the Hindu tradition, you'll see it in the Bhagavad Gita, is just don't focus so much on outcomes. Focus on doing the work that's in front of you, doing the work that you're supposed to do. In the Hindu tradition, the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is a warrior, and he has a conversation with his charioteer, who it turns out is Krishna, an incarnation, very much of a Jesus type figure in the Hindu tradition. And Krishna says, I have to fight against my cousins, and I grew up with them, and I love them, and I don't want to kill anybody. I don't want to fight. Krishna says, what's your profession? He says, I'm a warrior. Krishna says, then you have to fight. And don't worry about killing people. I do all the killing around here. You're just, you're just doing the work that's in front of you, playing your part in the play. And so Buddhism is very much not attached to outcomes. And the Buddha said on his deathbed, and again, this may be historical, maybe not. They said, well, who are we supposed to follow after you? He said, well, nobody. You're not supposed to follow. You're not even supposed to follow me. You're just supposed to make the best judgment you can about what you're supposed to do in a given situation, and focus on effort, not outcome. So Buddhism spread from India. It's now been, it's not a big thing in India because of Hinduism and also because of Islam, but it moved first to China, and there's a distinction as Buddhism evolved. The original Buddhism was, they disparagingly call it now the lesser vehicle. It was really focused on monastics, and it was, long process of studying the words and the life of the Buddha and studying all the scriptures and coming to your own personal enlightenment. And as Buddha moved into China and on towards Tibet, and the like, they said, well, no, it can't be about that. It has to be about everybody. You have to realize the essential oneness is not just you as an individual, it's you as part of the whole. And so there's actually a strain of Buddhism where they practice, they take the bodhisattva vows. And a bodhisattva is somebody who he's going to postpone his own enlightenment until everybody's enlightened. It's a very selfless, and we take vows like there are numerous sentient beings, and I'm going to save all of them. It's unattainable, but it's the ideal. Well, Buddhism eventually moved from China to Japan, and it took on much of the character of the Japanese culture. The art, is very austere. The shoguns and the warriors, the samurais, very militaristic. The religion and martial arts and archery, you came to see this is the same discipline in the spiritual search as there is in the conduct of our everyday lives. Focus. And and again, the sparseness. I read a story about a guy who went to a museum in Taiwan, and said, "Well, I should hire a guide because there's so much to see here, and I'm not going to understand what's important and what's not." And so the guide took him to a painting, and the man had a question about it, and the guide said, "Wait. You're looking at things through a Western lens. In the West, you think about the blank piece of paper, creation from nothing. In the East, we think in terms of addition by subtraction. You take the block and you take away all the unessential parts, and what's left is the beautiful sculpture. Um, and so it's also not that anything's created, but that something's realized. The sculpture was always in the rock. And very much when we talk about enlightenment in the East, we're talking about do you see your essential self? Do you see you're part of the oneness?
Mm.
So what developed in Japan was Zen, and Zen, and it's an interesting point to stop because first of all, I always say all religion is cultural, and when you go to a Tibetan Buddhist temple, they're chanting in Tibetan, and if you go to a Shinto temple, they're chanting in ancient Japanese. That their religion is all wrapped around the culture. You can't take it apart. And Christianity presents itself as sort of a universal religion, only in the way that Western culture is sort of universal, only in the way that it absorbed everyone else's, it displaced them. It became it's it's universal because it's every place, but it's not culturally universal. So Japan, there were two strains of Zen that survived, and one is the one that Dogen founded, and it's all about meditation. Basically, that if you can be aware of everything around you, but simultaneously empty of thoughts, then you'll clear your head out. You'll reduce all those inessential elements. You'll glimpse, the sculpture that was always there. Now, the other strain is called Rinzai, and there's two aspects. One is the meditation. The other is what's called koans. Well, if you talk to a Zen teacher, and koans are questions, and they're supposed to lead you not to the rational, logical, linear answer, but to the intuitive, immediate, creative answer. It's supposed to transport you into another way of thinking about things. And the thought is that if you are thinking about things in an intuitive, creative way, you're really open. You're really, like I said in the last episode, elevating to a perspective outside of yourself. And so if there's a series of maybe 500 questions that you discussed with your Zen teacher in the Rinzai tradition, and the questions don't have definite answers. It's not like Zen doctrine. The questions have sort of ambiguous answers, sort of intuitive, creative answers, and they're supposed to train your mind to think in intuitive, creative ways. So when you sit down with your Zen teacher and he asks you a question, and you start to rock back, and he says, no, don't think, speak. And then he starts to open your mouth. He says, no, don't speak, show me. It's very much of intuitively. If I ask you this, what do you do? What do you say? What do you realize? And it becomes a very helpful way to look at the world, and to see that the world is more complicated and more ambiguous and more complex and beautiful than we think that it is. And there are koans in Zen. I'll illustrate, like, is the river flowing under the bridge, or is the bridge flowing over the river? It just kind of makes you think, well, gee, I was rooted, to think about things in one way, but maybe you think about things in other ways.
Mm-hmm.
Or what was your original face before you were born? I don't know. Did I have a face is it this face? Is it a face that changes? Or, is my face any different than anyone else's face? It just kind of launches you into these really compelling ways of thinking about things. And we wanted to talk about Zen today because it's sort of where we landed. We were about convinced, as I mentioned earlier, that there was really no home for us. Our spirituality was so eclectic that we could be in a lot of places, but we wouldn't really be home in any. But Zen, because it's an evolving tradition that changed from India to China to Japan to the West, and now Western Zen is very different than, than original Indian Zen. Because it's not doctrinal or doctrinal, you don't have to believe certain things, you don't have to recite creeds, because it really puts so much emphasis on, as Carl said earlier, what is. Let's just observe what is. And the non-attachment and the craving and the ignorance in our personal lives, we have our own politics. And when Trump was first elected, he was like the antithesis of oneness, do the right thing for everybody, unconditional, impersonal love. It was just a very jarring thing. And I was writing my book at the time, and I had to put it down. And I put it down for years because I just couldn't write about oneness in the environment we were in. And, I was popping Xanax and taking a lot. We were both eating a lot of ice cream, and it was a very stressful time. And then we developed our Zen practice, and we really were encouraged to look at what is. So the election happens, and you say, well, I thought that people would vote a different way. I thought that, that God was in control. Well, you shouldn't really be attached to what you thought. Just look around and realize where you are. That this man was elected, that a lot of people thought he was the best choice, not the worst choice. And whether you like it or not, you have to live with it for the next 4 years.
Right.
So in the Zen practice, you lose your attachment, you lose your craving, you lose your ignorance. You're encouraged to look at what is, and it helps you to live a more peaceful, harmonious life. Doesn't mean I'm any happier about how the election went. Doesn't mean that I don't have difficulty with people that have beliefs that are different than mine, but the Zen practice just helps us to navigate life. And we're not popping Xanax, we're not eating ice cream, and our stomachs are not upset. We're, we're at peace. And as we said before, and I'm not trying to recruit anybody to Zen, I'm not trying to, but I'm trying to say that even if you think there's no place for you, maybe there is. And it's probably going to be if your path is anything like mine or ours, it's a place where ambiguity is accepted, different ideas are accepted. There's more of an emphasis on the personal and the practical, and not the speculative or the theoretical. And we have found similar homes in progressive Christian churches, in unity and Unitarian Universalism. I've recently started going to Quaker meetings. It's a beautiful tradition that, like Zen, is totally devoid of doctrine, and it's totally about experience, and it's totally about pursuing the oneness, whatever or whoever or wherever that is.
I just wanted to talk a little bit more practically about what Zen is for us. Zen, a lot about Zazen, which is sitting. It's just sitting. And so you sit in meditation and you just try to empty your mind. And the purpose of that is so you can find your essential self, okay, your true self, the inner self, without all the ego constructs. And what meditation does in Zazen is it teaches you to alleviate suffering. Because in Zen, one of the four, noble truths, is everybody suffers. I mean, that's life. Everybody has suffering in their life, or everybody has pain in their lives. That doesn't mean you have to suffer. And in Zen, the whole purpose, or one of the main purposes, is to alleviate that suffering. And how do you do that? Well, you do that by meditating and by what a common term is be here now. You don't, like Larry was talking about attachments. We get attached to our expectations. We get attached to the way we want things to be. But the importance is to be here now in the way things are, and to find peace in that. And so it has helped in my life, and where I have suffering in my life, Zen teaches a lot about impermanence. Everything is always changing. And so when you feel a lot of suffering about a particular pain you're going through, it has helped me think, well, this is not going to go on forever. This is going to all continually evolve. And the other way it helps me is that once you find your true self that's the same as everybody else's true self, it just allows you to let the little irritations go. It's just because in the scheme of things, they don't matter. In the reality of your essential self, all this other pain and suffering that's going on, it's just another construct. My true self is the same as your true self, is the same as Laura's true self, is the same as Larry's true self. That's where the connection is. That's where the oneness is. And in Zen, it's a lot more listening than talking. You sit and you just absorb the here and now, and you're not solving problems. You're not making things meet your expectations. It's just being here now. And that actually reduces a whole heck of a lot of suffering.
I like when
Yeah,
when you're talking about suffering, I like a lot of times the Christian experience brings us to suffering. It makes us uncomfortable. We're uncomfortable with suffering. And so we tend to kind of bypass, right? To say, well, this or that, it's an explanation or whatever. I like the idea of facing that suffering, or at least moving towards, like you said, alleviating suffering. What can I do? How can I experience this, but not avoiding it or proclaiming some magic solution that might happen for it or something like that, or to be better by and by. It's actually dealing with it, just facing it, right?
Yes, and a lot of Christians glorify suffering.
Right.
And in Zen, suffering just is. It just is. It's not a good thing or a bad thing. It is, and this is how you deal with it. It's impermanent. It's release your attachments. It's release your ignorance. It just is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the idea of be here now, if you really think about, what is causing me pain, a lot of it is regret about the past or fear about the future. But in the present, if you just say, what am I doing right now? Man, I'm in Colorado. I'm spending time with my wife. I'm on a Zoom call with my good friends. We're having engaging conversations. I mean, what's not to like? And I just used to spend so much time in regret and fear because I was focused on the past and the future.
I agree with that. Like even in this conversation, I'm thinking, yeah, but like what about, when you were talking about the election and just all the different things that are happening and, yeah, it's hard for me, and I'll speak for myself, not to worry about the future. So, so I love what you're saying.
Does it help anything to blame it on somebody? I mean, we generally do.
Well, the other thing I wanted to mention about Zen is not just a passive practice. I mean, there is a social justice part of Zen. It's like if you realize the essential selves of everybody, then you do have a responsibility. Yeah. So it's not just saying, this is okay, what's happening in the world right now. It's not okay.
Right.
So, I don't want to misrepresent it. That's because people do think of Zen as just you're off in a corner in your own little world. No, you have a responsibility because you're recognizing everybody's essential worth.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the realization,
if there's a God, they should also care about doing that. Anyway, go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, the realization that, that about the interconnectedness, it really helps you to develop some perspective about other people's behavior. I say sometimes, how could Jeffrey Dahmer ever have done what he did? or Adolf Hitler. And then I say, well, I really don't know anything about their chemistry. A lot of what people do is their chemistry. And I don't know much about their conditioning. I don't know if any of these people were subjected to horrible abuse. And I don't know what kind of fact pattern put people in the path where they did what they did. And I'm not so convinced that if I had the same chemistry and the same conditioning and the same fact pattern as Adolf Hitler or Jeffrey Dahmer, that I might not have done the same thing. And in a more realistic sense, I look at people who, well, I used to think when I was a conservative and when I was a Christian that people made bad choices, and that people in bad circumstances were there because of bad choices.
Right.
And as I met more people in more circumstances and understood more why they did what they did, I came to understand. And there's a saying, we judge ourselves by our intentions. There's that word again, Carl. And we judge others by their actions. But if we really got to know people and we knew their intentions, maybe we would understand a little better. Maybe we would be a little more forgiving about somebody that I used to think made a bad choice. Now I realize it really wasn't a choice, that it was a subject of the trauma that they were through,
Absolutely.
that they did what they had to do to protect themselves.
Right. That's right. And that takes
So
me
it's a
back.
very,
Oh, go ahead. Finish your thought.
it's just a very compassionate worldview that helps you live a better life. It's very practical. I think Jill and I both, that we don't want anybody to think that Zen is abstract, that it's internally focused, that it doesn't have to do with how people live their lives and live the oneness.
The ultimate goal of Zen is compassion. And if you can realize the compassion, then you realize that everybody has a story. Everybody has their traumas. Everybody has something that we don't know about.
That's right.
So, it helps you live a more compassionate life and helps you more not understand, but maybe accept. We don't know their story. So it gives people more grace.
That's kind of where I was going when we went to the Attachment and Trauma Network conference that we've been a part of now for a couple years. We both went through a poverty simulation. We were actually volunteering and working it. So we were like responsible for giving people jobs, okay, in this simulation. And it was just
taking them away.
And so that whole experience speaks to what you're saying. Like, we don't know, the generational trauma. It may not even be just, with this life that I have right now that I've experienced trauma. It can be generational trauma, such as poverty, and things like that. So that just speaks so beautifully to what you just said, because we don't know. And we walked away from that having a deeper level of compassion for people that are just trying to hold it together and just trying to make it, right? We don't know their circumstances. And yet how many times have I sat in judgment of, the homeless man on the corner when I don't know what his circumstances are. And like, to your point, Larry, if I had the same circumstances, I may be in the very same position.
I want to remind you, the book is called The Way by Larry Jordan. Her name is Jill Warden Jordan. Is that right?
Yes.
I like that. It almost kind of rhymes. Warden.
It does.
But we want to give you a last word. Just these sessions are running out too fast, and we got to go pick up grandkids and bring them back to our house. The chaos is about to begin.
And we're going to live in the moment.
Yeah, we're going to love it.
Of it all.
But just the last word to wrap up the series and wrap up this topic. Jill, do you want to start? Let Larry close us out.
The whole theme of these 4 episodes is everyone's related, everyone's connected. No matter where you find that connection, go with it, because that's what it's all about. It's all about connecting and realizing that ourselves are all the same, despite all the different ego constructs that we all make.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks
well said.
Yeah.
I think from my perspective, we're just grateful for the opportunity. We enjoy you guys so much. And, you know, I mean, it was interesting for me to write a book at the age I wrote it, to learn all these new things and meet all these new people. And folks like you have come across our paths, and, you've become important people in our lives. And it's really gratifying. And it's something I didn't expect to get from writing a book. And, I really enjoy, you mentioned, hey, call Larry up and talk to him. Please do call Larry up and talk to him. I mean, I enjoy this stuff, and I learned so much from people that might have learned a little bit from my book. I mean, people will say, have you ever thought of this? Or do you know about this writer? Or have you had this experience? Or do you know this tradition? And we just learned so much from the people we've met, like yourselves, since we tried this experiment. So we're just really grateful. You guys are both doing good work. You're some of our favorite people, and we just have really enjoyed spending this time with you.
Well, the feeling is 100% mutual. We would echo that right back to you.
Yeah, and I'm glad we're going to be in Colorado soon.
Mm-hmm.
We were kind of hoping and thinking maybe we could come to meet you this time, but it didn't work out.
Next time.
It will.
We'll make it work
It
one of
will.
these days.
And if not, we'll just get you here and do another work day.
Although I do think next February the ATN conference is in Dallas, so we should meet up.
By February, we'll see you again, at least. At least.
Well, go enjoy your grandkids.
Thank
All
you.
right.
I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, guys. For listeners out there, we appreciate you. We really do see you. We hear from you occasionally. We hear bits and pieces of your story. We count it as a privilege to listen to stories and to go through this with people like you. So, as always, I want to remind you to be where you are, be who you are, and be at peace.
Thank you for joining us today on the Desert Sanctuary podcast.
Remember, all who wander in the desert are not lost.
We believe all of our stories are sacred.
We are always here if you need someone to hear your story.
Check out our blog on Pathos and also our YouTube channel.
And stay tuned for our Leaning Forward conference.
Remember, we love you.
And be at peace.